If you've suffered from childhood trauma and you have found therapy unbeneficial, frustrating, and getting nowhere, here are 4 reasons why you may be feeling that way and what to do about it. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD, is not in our diagnostic manuals yet. There are areas of psychology and psychotherapy who have acknowledged that it exists, but there are very few people who specialize in CPTSD. And because of that, there are many of us out there who were trained to do psychotherapy in adherence to certain rules that don't work with people with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So a lot of the things that we learn in our training, in our education, and in our internships have to be kind of unlearned or set aside when we're dealing with people with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I've done on the videos that said that it's real good to get a therapist who has come through the complex post-traumatic stress disorder and has dealt with it and healing from it. But I also said that you don't necessarily have to have actually suffered with childhood trauma to be a good therapist. So there are a couple of things I want you to know about this. First of all, trauma-informed, which you will see in some profiles of some therapists, and trauma-trained are 2 different things. You want to look for a psychotherapist who has been trained in dealing with this kind of trauma. Not every therapist specializes in everything that you might need. And let me tell you why this is important. Because the trauma-informed therapist is not necessarily trained to conduct therapy with somebody with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So, for example, we were trained to keep a line between us and the client. And in doing so, we keep some kind of professional distance between us. But when you get a therapist who is trained in, has a track record with, and has obtained good results with people who have suffered childhood trauma, that person will have to put aside some of that because it needs to be long-term and it takes a while to develop a relationship. This can be a therapeutic relationship where I'm not sitting there like I'm the big doctor in a white coat and I'm studying you, but I develop trust to the point where you as the client would know that this is a safe place for you, where you don't have to deal with things like blame the victim. So, for example, a trauma-informed therapist who is not trauma-trained may suggest, for instance, that, okay, let's get into some family therapy. Let's pull your family in, your parents, whatever, and do some therapy with all of us. And that's not good if you suffer from complex post-traumatic stress disorder due to childhood trauma, because now you put me in a position where I got to look at these jokers that did me like that. And I don't think that this is good right now, so I'm out, for instance. A trauma-trained therapist will not put you in that position. They will understand. They will take the time they need to take in order to develop a rapport with you, so you know you are in a safe place and can be trusted, and they will never put you in a position of once again being considered the problem. Another thing that you might look for in that you might have experienced in therapy is you can tell while you're talking to this person, say about some things you went through in childhood, and they're kind of distant. and they kind of remove from it, and they say stuff to you that, oh, that's too bad, or I can't, or I can see why that might be a problem. Whatever it is, whatever the words are, you know that this person is not relating. So that might be somebody who is a good therapist, but they're not trained in how to deal with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay? In order for a trauma-trained individual to be successful with you, they will also understand that talk therapy ain't cutting it. Talking about a matter, the person, the client being aware of a matter is not transformative. Just talking about something over and over again is not going to transform your life. A trauma-informed therapist, not to say that they're not a good therapist, what they do is not going to understand that. See, we have these protocols. Somebody might be CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical therapy, or there are all these different modalities that we will use in certain situations. But again, complex post-traumatic stress disorder is not in the diagnostic manual, so you're not going to find me in there. Okay? And so when you don't find me in there, which modality are you getting ready to use? See, a lot of that stuff is not going to be beneficial. As a survivor of childhood trauma, you want to see transformation. I don't want to keep talking about what I went through. I don't need you to keep pointing out my triggers. I already know they there. Let's get into some tools and some therapy that's going to transform my life, as opposed to me sitting here 6 months from now still talking about it and get no better. Another thing that a typical therapist versus a trauma-trained therapist is that they understand the dynamics of how you as a survivor are perceiving the things they're saying to you or perceiving their actions, so that they know that they can't just be a fly on the wall listening to what you're saying. They need to be engaging with what you're saying. They need to be providing you directives and just challenging your perceptions, while also understanding why you think that way or see things that way. And that takes that trust I talked about earlier. Understanding that it takes time to build that trust and giving you a safe place, so that they're not spitting out these platitudes that, oh yeah, well, you know, your parents did the best they could. I heard one guy, Patrick Teahan, I'll put his picture up right here. He was saying that that ain't working for this. Okay? You can't just be the fly on the wall waiting for the client to figure everything out themselves. You have to be engaging with that client, understanding what things look like from their perspective and challenging some of those beliefs, but also providing support and the tools that you're going to need in order to navigate, say, an ongoing relationship with a narcissistic parent. Or how you are not able to connect in relationships because of what you went through. Understanding the why and not looking at it like you are the problem. It's like, what's your problem? It needs to be what happened to you, and understanding how you're thinking is directly informed by what happened to you, and to be able to know when to put their foot down and really push and challenge you, and when they need to back off and gently work with you and be able to give you actionable, effective tools to accomplish what you need to do to draw healthy boundaries in relationships. Sometimes trauma-trained therapists will challenge you on, why are you subjecting yourself to that? challenge you on a place where instead of telling you you need to reconcile with whoever the problem is in your life with respect to trauma, and when you need to, hey, maybe you need to just cut your losses. But see, a lot of us are trained in other areas not to be that involved in the decision making. But a trauma trained therapist will know when they need to. They will know when they need to. They will understand that there's a long way you have to come before they start employing different modalities that we have learned sitting in the classroom. I hope this makes sense. So interview. This is what I want you to do. If you look, you're going to have to take some time to do this and understand that part of the thing is, just like in relationships, dating, whatever, sometimes you have chemistry with somebody and sometimes you don't. And when you're dealing with a therapist to deal with childhood trauma, there has to be a chemistry there. You have to have established rapport, and you have to feel safe in that therapeutic relationship, and you have to trust the therapist. So you're going to have to interview them. Don't just go to Psychology Today and look up a therapist who says they're trauma informed. When you look for a therapist, you're looking for somebody who is trauma trained. Trauma informed is not trauma trained. That's one thing you're looking for. The second thing you want to do is you want to ask them what's their area of expertise. What types of therapeutic interventions do you do? Because we can all be specializing in this, specializing in eating disorders, specializing in that. You need somebody who specializes in childhood trauma. You want to find that out. If they are not explicit in just detailing what they do, move on. And if they are explicit enough for you to understand what they do, if you're not hearing trauma trained, then you need to move on automatically. If you're hearing trauma trained, then you want to interview them, find out what is your process. If I become your client, what is your process? What do you do? How long is this going to take? For instance, when you're dealing with childhood trauma, they need to be willing to invest the time necessary to understand your background. And sometimes the intake can take 2 or 3 sessions on this for them to understand your specific issues, what you dealt with growing up, what age you were when these things happened to you. If they don't have that as part of their process, then you should probably reconsider. Also, if you talk to someone and you're interviewing them as a possible therapist, and they tell you, I can solve your problems in 6 sessions, not. I don't care if they informed trauma, trained, whatever. A trauma-trained therapist is generally, especially if they got some time under their belt dealing with clients who have suffered childhood trauma, they're not going to tell you it's a quick fix. It's going to take some time just to develop the trust in the relationship. And anybody who's trained and experienced in childhood trauma will know that. So you don't want to hear that. Another thing you want to look for is ask questions to try to suss out how much they provide feedback. Because if you suffered childhood trauma, we are generally taught in school that we don't do a bunch of talking. That it's all about the client. We're trained that we don't want to interfere because there's this transference, countertransference thing where if I haven't healed from my trauma, then I might not be there fully for you, and I don't want to transfer my issues to you. I've got to keep my perspective out of things as a therapist so that I'm not tainting the therapeutic relationship. But when somebody's trained in childhood trauma, then they know that there's going to be a whole bunch of talking they're doing. They might talk half the time Okay? And so you want to suss that out and feel out just how much feedback you're going to get from this individual, or whether they're stuck in the old paradigms that we're taught that don't work in childhood trauma. Are they going to challenge you on stuff? Because you don't want somebody that's going to just sit there and wait for you to come up with the answer. What you need is somebody who's understanding the holistic picture where you're concerned, and they're giving you that feedback, challenging your beliefs, being understanding about why you have certain perspectives, and providing you tools to help you to come to a more realistic, more empowered position in your life. Because they really shouldn't even be talking about, if they jumping right off the gate when you interview them, talking about, yeah, we're going to bring in the whole family. Not, move on. Don't even finish the doggone interview, because generally there's a lot of therapy that has to go on to get you to a point where the family is not affecting you the way that they used to, where you are more empowered and standing in your own power before even talking about family therapy. And that should probably only happen if those jokers who did you wrong have come to a place to understand that they are wrong and they're willing to change. And that doesn't often happen. And finally, listen with your second ear to hear if there's anything in their answers that would lead you to believe that they are going to make dismissive assumptions about you. And what I mean is that sometimes a therapist, a trauma-trained therapist shouldn't be doing this, but sometimes the therapist will, because you're having these perceptive challenges or connection challenges, will look at you as the problem. That's a dismissive assumption about you. And from that perspective, they will always be coming at you from a perspective of, you're the one who's wrong in this. No, we already deal as trauma survivors with the challenge of feeling like we brought the abuse on ourselves. We deserve the abuse, feeling ashamed about the abuse. You don't want to hear nothing like that coming out of this person. That's dismissive assumptions about you. And you need somebody who understands the dynamics and the repercussions and the devastation that perpetuate in your life as a result of being the victim of child trauma. I hope that some of the things I've said to you have been beneficial. I would like for you to look up Patrick Teahan. I am putting a link to his page. And while he has moved from doing so much individual therapy with clients, he is remarkably moving into training therapists to deal with childhood trauma. I think that's a remarkable calling of his, because he apparently has come to the realization as a survivor himself that the more people who can be out here trained to be good CPTSD therapists who deal with childhood trauma, the better for all of us. So please go to Patrick Teahan's channel, because he also has many videos out there, and his role plays are superb. He does this thing where he playing both sides of the story, and it's hilarious for one thing, and it's revealing on another hand. So go to Patrick Teahan, go follow his page, subscribe to him, because he's an excellent resource for anybody who's suffering from childhood trauma, and he will give you all the tools you need to be able to move through a lot of that and to find a therapist who will be beneficial to you. Click below to get a free breakthrough session with me, and we can talk about some things. I don't do psychotherapy. I'm a coach, but we might decide that we should partner together to get you to where you need to be. Because there's no reason that anything that happens in your past has to be the end of your story. I'm Dr. Linda. Always remember your greatest power is realizing the truth of who you are. Know that truth. Hey, if you like what you see here today, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so that you know when we upload, and like and share the video. Thanks.